Rain in Savannah has a way of clinging to your face like it knows your business, and the morning we walked out of the chapel, lilies too sweet, him too bright, grief arranged like flowers, my sister Madison said for the benefit of everyone leaning on the railings. Nora brought the quilts again, and the word quilt slid over my cotton tote like a verdict, while my mother Ruth said in that trim soft voice she uses to make a command sound like care, "Let her keep her things, Madison, it's a funeral." And my father Charles said the day's direction the way traffic lights talk. "We're due at Mr. Whitaker's in 30 minutes. Don't be late." I kept the tote higher on my hip, feeling how the two quilts inside held heat like bread right out of the oven, how the lavender sachet my grandmother tucked at the corner lifted through the damp, how one short thread had worked its way free along the binding and caught my wrist like a small thorn that tells the truth before a mouth can. My grandmother Lillian Hart left me her coverlets in patterns, written exactly like that, without pearls or securities or the things a family expects to pass down when it likes being seen. My sister Madison said it louder. "Rags and paper. Classic." And the rain caught the edge of her lipstick and didn't dare smudge it. "My name is Nora Hale. I am 32. I hem sleeves and steady seams for a living in a shop off Bull Street where the iron sings when it's happy. I was the granddaughter who sat next to grandmother Lillian and learned that straight lines don't make strong quilts. Ladders do, long runs of stitch crossed with short ones so the pull is honest. I learned this the way you learn a person, by touch. In our family, my sister Madison learned how to be looked at. I learned how to keep something from coming apart. At the curb, my mother Ruth said to the funeral director, "We'll take the black sedan." And then to me, warmer than she meant to be, "Stay close, Nora." And I knew she meant don't ask why. My father Charles said nothing, just checked his watch the way men do when they want the world to cooperate. The chapel bell shook one fat drop off its lip. It landed on the tote and spread like a coin. At Mr. Whitaker's office, the second floor of a brick building that smells like lemon polish and paper dust, my mother Ruth said to the receptionist with her prettiest teeth, "We're the Hart family." And my father Charles said our arrival time out loud as if time were a thing he could make behave, and we were shown into a room with a torchlight lamp and an oak table that had listened to other people's oxygen before ours. My sister Madison said to the air, "I have to be at Victoria by 2. And that store name Victoria did the work it always does for her, turning a job into a platform. Mr. Whitaker said, mild, "My condolences," and opened a folder that looked like a thin book and then another that looked like a promise, and the pen near his thumb clicked once all by itself. My sister Madison said in a half-whisper that travels better than sound, "Let's make this quick." And my mother Ruth said toward me, not toward the lawyer, "Don't glare, Nora, your sister's on a schedule." And I was not glaring. I was counting the quilt blocks through canvas like a rosary because counting has saved me from speaking more times than virtue has. "First dispositions," Mr. Whitaker said. And he adjusted his glasses the way a man arranges a fact. "To Miss Madison Hale, the jewelry casket, including the platinum set, and a checking account in the amount of $32,000. To Miss Nora Hale, the 2 hand-stitched quilts of Lillian Hart, the box of paper patterns, and all belongings related to her needlework projects." My sister Madison said fair like a person tasting a lemon and pretending it's sweet, and my mother Ruth said, "You see," the tidy period at the end of a sentence written years ago in a room I wasn't invited into, and my father Charles said, "Let's move along," because he loves the part where things end. And that would have been our day like always like them if notary MS. Carver said from the end of the table in a voice that belongs to doctors and good librarians, "There are additional provisions regarding the unique nature of Miss Nora's inheritance." And the room's hum changed. A real silence arrived, the kind that makes machines reconsider themselves. Mr. Whitaker said, opening a second, thicker folder with the care you keep for a sleeping child. "Mrs. Hart structured certain assets through a series of LLCs, and directed their transfer in such a way that the documentary originals are housed within everyday objects delivered to the beneficiary. It is unusual but legal. LLC membership certificates are securities." My sister Madison said, louder now because volume is the brother of disbelief, "What assets?" And Mr. Whitaker said, still mild, "Approximately 7 properties, a pair of historic homes on Jones Street, a small retail space off Bull, 2 workshops in the district, and interest in a parking cooperative. Current estimated value $3.6 million. Current gross monthly income approximately $28,000. And the quilts in my tote felt distinctly warmer. like they'd been holding a secret that chose me before I knew I would deserve it. But where would the documents be? My sister Madison said, tripping over documents like a loose stair. In a safe. A bank? And Notary Miss Carver answered, efficient, in the stitching. And Mr. Whitaker said to the air above the quilts as if the fabric would nod. Each quilt's binding contains narrow fabric channels. Inside are laminated strips and micro tags linked to the certificate numbers. Our office holds certified copies and ledgers of issuance. However, the operative originals, per the will, are entrusted in person to Miss Nora Hale. I slid my fingers under the binding and felt a firm, living path, like an artery where a pulse belongs, running the length of the edge. Mr. Whitaker said, "May I?" And Notary Miss Carver said, "We prepared tools." And with a pair of blunt tweezers he drew out a thin laminated strip that caught the lamp and answered it with a quiet shine. The print was small and calm. Hart Textiles Holdings LLC. Membership Unit Certificate, Nora Hale, and something in my chest rearranged so a larger breath could fit. "This is absurd," my sister Madison said, dialing up instead of thinking. "You can't sew millions into blankets." And Mr. Whitaker said, the way a judge might answer a door. "One can if parallel records live here." He touched his folder, and here. He tapped the notary seal. And with the Secretary of State. "Your grandmother anticipated a challenge. She left statements of basis, issue logs, and a letter of explanatory intent. There is also a witness statement from Mrs. Langford, the seamstress who assisted with the channels." My mother Ruth said, smaller than I expected, Lillian, like a prayer that had lost the words, and my father Charles said, not unkind this time, "It seems she did what she meant." I remembered grandmother Lillian teaching me ladder stitch at the kitchen table, her voice a threader of its own. Spread the weight honest, Nora, long, then cross, then long again, and how her fingers looked like little tools up close. The lesson was about quilts. The lesson was not about quilts. "We'll scan each serial," Notary Miss Carver said, already moving. "Then log the physical transfer to Miss Nora. Sign here and here. No staples. Store flat. We'll provide moisture sleeves. Reissued name certificates will follow within 30 days. And my sister Madison said, "I object." And my father Charles said, the family reflex. "We'll have counsel." And Mr. Whitaker said, "Steady, you may." And set a beige envelope before me and another before my sister Madison. "There are letters." I opened mine. Grandmother Lillian wrote in a hand meant to survive kitchens and time. "Nora, you are the person who reads seams. And seams live more than thread. Lives live there. Keep tenants first, do not break houses for quick gain. Honor the workshops, they feed families. Keep prices honest, remember. A quilt only warms the ones beneath it. Others need only to know it exists." The words did the exact thing a good hem does. They made everything lie as it should. My sister Madison said to the room without picking a person, "This isn't done," and I said without heat, "You got what needs a mirror, I got what needs hands." And for the first time in a long time I heard myself without apology underneath. "Sign for receipt of originals," Notary Miss Carver said, sliding the page so the place found me on its own. I signed my name like a person anchoring fabric to fabric. The pen didn't scratch. Outside, the Savannah air had thickened into coins of rain again. The tote bit into my shoulder in the bright, honest way of weight that will pay you back. My mother Ruth said at the curb, "Come by the house, we'll talk." And my father Charles said, "Give it a day." And my sister Madison said to her phone, "Not to us, I'm not letting this stand." And the sedan door closed around her like a choice. On the sidewalk, I stood with 7 houses breathing against my hip and thought about the quiet things that make and keep a life. Steam from an iron, the whisper of cotton against cotton, a laminated strip catching lamplight. And how some families pass down the skill of being seen while other families pass down the skill of holding. The rain thickened. The tote warmed. The street kept going without us. And when the day finally stopped talking, the only name that still lay where it belonged was mine. The rain thickened. The tote warmed. The street kept going without us. And I stood under the courthouse awning long enough to feel how water can argue with gravity and still lose. Then I lifted the strap higher and told myself out loud, though no one asked, that names don't keep themselves in place. Paper does, and paper needs daylight, counters, witnesses, and the kind of pens that leave grooves you can feel with your eyes closed. My mother Ruth said from the sedan door that had not decided to be fully open, "Come by the house first, Nora, will talk." And my father Charles said with the cadence of a good hallway, "Let it breathe a day." And my sister Madison said to her screen like it was a mirror with jurisdiction, "I'm not letting this stand." And the rain made commas between us and sent me toward the recorder's office because grief waits but filings don't. Inside, the building smelled like toner and old varnish, a scent I have always trusted, and the marble steps kept my shoes honest. Clerk Alvarez said at the window with a kindness that made room for procedure, "Ma'am?" And I said, "I'm Nora Hale. I'm here to record notice regarding LLC membership certificates and to file change of contact for rent remittance." And he didn't blink at the runway of words, he just said, "Do you have the will copy, the acceptance and ID?" And I slid the beige packet Mr. Whitaker said would carry me through a day like this. It made that dulled spine-deep shuff sound paper makes when it believes it's home. Clerk Alvarez said, "We scan, timestamp, return, this is public record." And while the machine pulled the pages like a patient animal, I placed one quilt on a side chair, not folded but resting, and it warmed the vinyl as if it had opinions. Clerk Alvarez said, reading the lines a human way, "LLC transfer by will, membership certificates, operative originals delivered, copies on file with counsel." And then he said the most important sentence a weekday can offer, "You did this in the right order," and slid me a small square with the ink still damp, the recorder's seal raised like a fingertip, today's first stamp of the world saying we saw you. The next stop had fluorescent lighting that could turn a peach into a ghost. The management office for the 2 Jones Street houses, the one with the framed photos of porches and azaleas coexisting. Property manager Mrs. Keene said without makeup that might run, "We loved Lillian." And before I could answer me too in a voice that fits, she said, "Rents go out on the 25th. To change remittance we need a recorded notice, W-9 and a banking authorization." And the tote learned a new posture against my hip as I set the stamp square on her desk. Mrs. Keene said, "Keys?" And it was like the room had remembered a word I didn't realize it missed. "She always kept spares here, Mrs. Keene said, opening a drawer with a brass label that read Heart, Historic, and laid out a little fan of tagged blanks, cool metal against wood. I didn't reach. I let her hands perform the ceremony. She said, 2 front doors, 2 garden gates, 2 maintenance sets. You sign, we log. We do not rekey unless instructed." And I felt the future shift a fraction, hinges turning without complaint. I signed my name full, slow, and the ledger stamp landed with a soft clap that felt more like welcome than warning. The door chimed behind us, and the rain blew in a wet sentence. My sister Madison said before her umbrella finished collapsing, "You cannot take those keys." And Mrs. Keene said without removing her finger from the ledger, "I can," and I did. "See the notice, see the stamp." And my sister Madison said to me, "Not to the desk." Mother said, "Come home first." And I said, because we were in a room that rewards the truth scale to the furniture. Home is where things are recorded. My father Charles said from behind my sister Madison, because he could make a doorway out of anything, "Let's not be ungracious." And my mother Ruth said into her shawl, rain making little dark coins in its wool, "We wanted to bless the houses." And Mrs. Keene said, professional as a clean sink, "Blessings are welcome at open houses, locks are for liability," and handed me a small folder with emergency contacts, bin days, the number you call when pipes try for freedom, and a note in Lillian's hand that she must have left with the office. "If you are reading this, you know how to do the slow work, slow is fine." And I had to put my mouth into a shape that could swallow that sentence without losing any of it. We went together, because sometimes the fastest way to stop future arguments is to bring them to present doors. To the first house on Jones, the one with the butter yellow shutters that always looked like they knew a story. The rosemary by the steps let its smell go as we brushed past, and the porch boards took my weight the way old wood does, with memory. My sister Madison said, clicking something on her phone I didn't want to see, "You'll ruin the rental with your sewing." And I said, watching Mrs. Keene check the lock and turn it with that tiny respectful torque, "Quilts aren't messy, they just know how to hold." Inside, the cool stayed high, and the rooms had that good echo that means nobody has lied to the floors. Mrs. Keene said, "Tenants upstairs, downstairs is between leases. If you wish to keep one unit as a family place, we'll need a written instruction and a security deposit. Owners pay too." And my mother Ruth said, lightly wounded, "Owners?" And Mrs. Keene said, not unkind, "We use the names on the notice, it keeps us from picking wrong," and set the keys on the built-in under the window like a lesson you can touch. We toured like people who were new and not new. The stove had that old enamel that forgives. The windows had cords that minded you if you asked. My father Charles said, squinting at a radiator, Who pays to replace this junk when it finally dies? And I said because the letter from Lillian had left me keywords I could lean against. Repairs come first. Families come from rooms that aren't afraid of winter. And my sister Madison said, working to regain altitude, you think you're better than us because you have stamps, and I said, meeting the keys with my palm as if hands were seals too. I think paper is how we stop hurting each other repeatedly. And the room received it, because rooms know when you've said something they can hold without bending. Procedure has its own appetite, and it wasn't finished with me. We crossed to the small retail space off Bull Street where the florist Mr. Kim said he was about to trim eucalyptus and did we like the smell, and he said, rent auto drafts on the 25th, the account is, and paused because he is careful and I said showing him the notice and the new authorization, it will be Hart Textiles Holdings LLC Nora Hale managing member, and the words didn't make me flinch. He typed them slowly, looking up between syllables like a person taking a portrait, and he said, she told me you were the only one who could hem a slant without the world noticing, and I laughed in that small cracked way grief uses when it wants to behave. Back on the sidewalk, the rain had thinned to a lace that didn't mind being seen. My phone breathed. My mother Ruth texted we're making soup, and my sister Madison texted not over and Mr. Whitaker texted Secretary of State filing acknowledged. Keep your originals flat. Carver says hi and I slid the phone back, because afternoons like this don't need more screens than doors. I saved one door for last. Grandmother Lillian's workshop, a small box of a place behind the second Jones house, window like a patient eye, table like a faithful back. The light in there always knew where to go. I set both quilts on the table and unrolled the moisture sleeves Notary MS. Carver said to use and slid the laminated strips inside, one by one, reading each tiny number like it had consonants and vowels. I labeled a simple ledger date certificate where it lives because duplicating proof is how you learn to sleep. They found me anyway, not like a storm, like a habit. The back door rattled once, politely, the way southern doors do when they want to be invited into complicity. My sister Madison said through the screen as if the mesh were a veil that would make us pretty, Mother made soup, come home. And before I could adjust my face, my mother Ruth said with the sound of a spoon on a pot in her voice, we'll bless the houses and put all this legal fuss in a drawer. And my father Charles said from further back, inventory driven, what's the monthly after insurance and taxes? And the paper in my hands didn't tremble. It weighed me down in the best way, like a hand on your shoulder that answers stay. I'll come by, I said, and after a breath that set the eucalyptus Mr. Kim said he'd cut floating in the air again. But the drawer where this goes is made of oak and lives at the recorder's office, and my sister Madison said, stinging where compliments should go, you think stamps make you moral, and I said, looking at the ledger stamp and then at my own ink next to it, they make me accountable. Evening decided to start. The rosemary outside threw its green into the air, the workshop bulb hummed a note that promised to stop if I asked, the quilts warmed the table like they had small suns stitched under the cotton, and I put each set of keys into a labeled envelope, Jones Upper, Jones Lower, Gates, Maintenance, and wrote my name in the corner where names do their best work. When I turned off the light, the room held its shape without me. The door clicked shut with that tidy sound truth makes when it knows the lock. And the first night I slept as the owner of anything, the house did not argue. And the first night I slept as the owner of anything, the house did not argue. Morning came in the color of clean muslin, soft and a little stubborn, and I stood at the kitchen sink with steam on my face from a kettle that believed in usefulness, telling myself that paper is the only apology a lock accepts, and today would be about showing paper to things that open and close. The phone vibrated with a habit. My mother Ruth texted breakfast at 9, family only, and my sister Madison texted don't get comfortable, and the rosemary outside knocked on the window like someone who knows where you keep the spare. Procedure first, the kind that lets you be brave later. I walked to the back workshop and lifted the quilts the way you lift a sleeping child, slid the laminated membership strips back into their moisture sleeves, logged each on my little ledger with the same slow seriousness I used to use when grandmother Lillian taught me ladder stitch, long cross long, then set the ledger on the table where the grain could hold it steady. I put the Jones Upper keys in my left pocket and Jones Lower in my right to keep the day from mixing itself, and I told the door out loud, I'll be back by noon, because some doors appreciate a promise. At the recorder's office, clerk Alvarez said good morning in that tone that fits everyone and no one, and I said Nora Hale, and he said notices on file, and slid across the counter 2 clean copies of yesterday's time-stamped entries, the raised seal catching the light like a silver knuckle. Next window permits. Clerk Hendricks said, if you plan any lock work, we like a courtesy note. It avoids neighbor calls, and I said, noted, and wrote out a one-line description, rekey if necessary, owner present. No drilling without police approval, because Savannah loves manners even when it's fixing its teeth. I saved the florist for last because eucalyptus makes courage smell like something you can put on, and Mr. Kim said, morning, Miss Nora. Then handed me a small brown envelope I hadn't ordered. Young lady dropped this, a relative? She used your name like it owed her money. Inside, lined paper with a thin, tidy anger. To whom it may concern. All matters regarding Jones Street are to be directed to Madison Hale until probate concludes. No letterhead, no case number. Just the confidence of someone who believes volume counts. I thanked Mr. Kim, slid the note behind my stamped copies without letting it touch them, and felt the day change its grip. At Jones, the porch was dry in the middle and wet at the edges, which is how truth looks most days. The downstairs unit, between tenants, held its breath the way clean rooms do. I unlocked the door, set my tote on the built-in, and walked the walls like you walk a perimeter. Windows latched, outlets humming, radiator pretending to be useful. The upstairs tenant, Doyle from Ohio if I remembered Mrs. Keene's notes right, cracked her door and said shyly, we heard things, and I said, you'll hear fewer, ownership is continuity, and gave her Mrs. Keene's number on a scrap I labeled in block letters so fear wouldn't curl it. The knock at the garden gate didn't bother pretending. It was brisk and professional and used to being obeyed. A man in a navy polo stood there with a tool bag and a company logo that wanted to be a badge. He said locksmith, work order for a rekey, and held up a clipboard like a priest would hold bread. I didn't take it. Owner. I said, not loud, just accurate. Who called you? He said a first name that belonged to no one on my street, and then the second name, Madison, as if my sister were a category of authorization. Work order. I said. He flipped the page, let me read the scrawl. Emergency rekey. Owner unavailable. Sister authorizes. Drill if needed. There was no permit note. There was no phone number that would survive questions. Officer Brown said, ma'am? From behind the gate because Miss Doyle is not from here and blessedly believes in calling, and I have never loved Ohio more. He said, we got a suspicious circumstance call. And the locksmith straightened because uniforms make even screwdrivers reconsider. I showed Officer Brown the recorded notice, the seal, the keys in my left and right pockets like twin witnesses. Owner Nora Hale, he said, reading the way solid people read, and turned to the locksmith. No work here today without this signature. And tapped my name. The locksmith pulled the politest face his industry issues and said, no problem. But the paper on his clipboard blew up at the corner with the kind of indignation that only comes from being thin. My sister Madison said from the sidewalk without stepping inside the gate, we're preventing liability. And we worked hard to flex bigger than it was. My mother Ruth said from beneath a magnolia because she does love a good tree to stage a feeling, we're trying to bless the house, Nora. And my father Charles said to the officer like he was asking the weather for a favor, we're just being prudent. And Officer Brown said the sentence that calms a street. Prudence looks like paperwork. He took the work order, circled the line with sister authorizes, and said to the locksmith, pack up. We walked it through like grown-ups. I said to Officer Brown, I'll add a courtesy note at permits. Any lock changes will be logged, any drilling only with police presence, and he said, that's how you keep neighbors out of each other's throats. And to my sister Madison he said, you've been warned about interference. And she opened her mouth to escalate and found no step that wouldn't break her ankle. My mother Ruth said, we could have a key as family. And I said, tenant safety first. Management will issue guest codes for scheduled visits. And Mrs. Keene said, arriving with the efficiency of someone who has a relationship with clocks, visits are by calendar signed by owner. That's policy, not attitude. When you stop a bad plan with paper, the day rewards you with 10 small mercies. We changed the gate code through the box misses. Keene said they installed last winter. We placed a tamper-evident seal sticker across the downstairs deadbolt, not to lock anyone out, to tell the truth if someone tried. We put a courtesy notice in the hall, rekey scheduled only by owner, do not admit contractors without ID and written notice, and I initialed the bottom the way a seamstress knots her thread. Mrs. Keene said sign here under an entry that read keys audited, and I watched her stamp the ledger. There is a small quiet joy in ink meeting fiber that has nothing to do with romance and everything to do with civilization. Afternoon leaned its elbow on the porch rail. Mr. Whitaker said on the phone, after I sent him a picture of the work order, "Do not engage further. I'll file a cease and desist citing interference with property management and attempt to induce unauthorized entry. If any forged letters show up, save in a clear sleeve. We'll route to the Secretary of State if they use company names." I told him about the note Mr. Kim handed me, to whom it may concern, and he said, "Perfect, send a scan." And then he said, and I heard his smile, "Don't actually scan, just photograph flat, natural light. We don't need a machine's soul today. Even lawyers have humor when paper is winning." I made one mistake. I let my mother Ruth set a bowl on the picnic table. "Soup," she said, offering warmth like it were a contract. "Chicken and rice, your grandmother's way." And memory did its worst best work. The smell took a shortcut to softer years. "Eat," my mother Ruth said, and I took one spoon because kindness deserves to be seen even when it's confused about its job, and my sister Madison said, "See, we can be normal," and my father Charles said, "Sign a family key policy and we'll drop it," and I set the spoon down and said, "Policies live with people who keep them," and the breeze moved the tamper seal 1 millimeter and reminded me that paper doesn't get sleepy. They left with a flurry of not goodbyes. Officer Brown said to me at the gate, "Call if a truck shows up," and to Mrs. Keene, "We've got your number." And then the day gave us back our square of quiet. I swept the downstairs and found exactly nothing except a stray nail and the feeling that the house approved. I labeled the nail in a jar front room, baseboard found, because small order fights big chaos on your behalf when you're not watching. By 3 Notarium. Carver said on a crisp voicemail, "Copies of your recorded pages arrived. Secretary of State acknowledges the membership record. Hang on to your sleeves, 30-day reissues in queue." And I stood in the empty living room and let the word acknowledges stack bricks in my ribs. "Mr. Kim said through the open florist door as I passed, "You smell like rosemary and ink," and I said, "That's today's perfume." And he laughed and tucked a small eucalyptus sprig in my tote because some men know how to bless without paperwork and I won't hold it against them. Evening trimmed the block neat. I locked the garden gate, tugged the seal sticker lightly to teach it I meant it, turned the Jones lower key one last time, and wrote down the time in my pocket notebook because times matter when people want to argue about them later. On the way home, the rain started over in a finer handwriting, and the streets said, "Be careful the way streets say it here," by Shining. I set the tote on my kitchen table, laid the 2 stamped copies flat under a glass pie plate so the corners wouldn't take a set, and put the work order in a clear sleeve because not all garbage belongs in the trash. Some garbage graduates to evidence. The kettle did what kettles do. I poured water over a bag that promised calm and waited for the color to tell me the truth. The knock, when it came, carried a blue envelope edge up like a blade. No stamp, no smile, just a rectangle with my name printed too perfectly. I looked through the peephole and saw no face, only sleeve and paper. The way a story announces itself when it doesn't plan to stay and argue. I opened to the chain. Inside the envelope, on cheap letterhead that thought fonts could do a lawyer's job, there was a family access agreement already signed. My name, not my hand. My sister Madison's signature bold enough to be a dare. A notary block with a commission number that looked made in a hurry. I didn't reach for a pen. I reached for the clear sleeve. I didn't reach for a pen. I reached for the clear sleeve, because rooms that hold their shape prefer truth in plastic before truth in ink. And the paper inside the blue envelope felt too light for something that wanted to boss a lock. The kettle behind me went from whisper to silence the way witnesses do when trouble walks in, and I slid the family access agreement under the lamp, letting the shade turn its confidence into flat daylight. My name sat there, Nora Hale, inked in a hand that leans right where mine leans left, the sweep on the N a little theatrical like a person who thinks flourishes are facts. The notary block wore a lazy seal, oval off-center commission number ending in 3 nines, the kind of vanity a liar thinks luck will bless. My mother Ruth said through the door as if Wood were a person she could persuade, "Sign and we'll stop this back and forth." And my sister Madison said with that fresh confidence paper gives the person who didn't bring any, "It's standard, Nora, family keys in case of emergency." And my father Charles said from the hallway that makes him sound taller than he is, "We can't spend all year checking with offices." And the clear sleeve made a soft sigh when it swallowed the page because plastic knows how to keep a distance. Procedure first, the kind that doesn't panic. I took a photo of the agreement flat under the lamp, corners included, then flipped it and did the back, because forgery often forgets that the reverse has a voice. I called Mr. Whitaker, and Mr. Whitaker said in that unbothered tone only attorneys and Old Porch's own, "Do not sign. Place in a sleeve. I'll file a cease and desist and a spoliation letter. They are to preserve any drafts, messages or devices used in creating or delivering this. Also, will verify the notary commission with the Secretary of State." He paused, listening to his own pen. "Open your speaker. Loop in Notary Miss Carver." Notary Miss Carver said after the first ring, crisp as a new page. "Describe the seal." And I did, oval, off-center, 3 nines, the name slanting downhill. She said, "Commission formats here run 2 letters plus 6 digits. And all 9s ending is performative. Check for an embosser bruise under the print real stamp's dent fiber." I tilted the page at an angle. The lamp drew its thin gold line across the field. No bruise, just toner laid down like a dare. Notary Miss Carver said, "Good. Photograph at a raking angle, let me see tooth and shadow." And when I sent it, she said, "Flat surface, no compression marks. This seal was likely pasted from an image. Hold. I'm calling the notary division." The hallway air cooled by a degree, the way rooms change when someone starts speaking to a building with law instead of with voices. My mother Ruth said through the door, sweeter than the tea she never brews for me, "Honey, we don't need outsiders, we're just asking for a set of keys." And I said, because keys belong to names, we don't give access to people who arrive with pretend witnesses. And my sister Madison said, like a coin tossed against concrete, "You always make this dramatic." And the clear sleeve didn't have an opinion, it had a job. "Notary Ms. Carver said back on the line, faster now. "No such commission on record. The number ties to a lapsed license from another county that belongs to an Emily. Different surname, different seal language. The notary division recommends you file fraud complaint form N12. They'll pull store footage if delivery occurred at a business. If at your door, they'll ask the responding officer to collect the document." She inhaled softly. I heard her aligning staples on her desk and thought, "I'll draft a notary fraud affidavit for you to sign at my office. Do not hand them the original. Give police a copy in a sleeve. Keep chain of custody tight." Right on cue, the universe brought boots. Officer Brown said from the landing with that patient authority that keeps buildings from biting each other, "Miss Hale, it's Brown," and I opened to the chain. He kept his hands visible. Cops and tailors both know what hands can say. Officer Brown said, "We received a call about a document dispute," and behind him my sister Madison said cheerfully, "Not a dispute, an agreement," and my father Charles said heavier, "We're preventing risk," and my mother Ruth said almost singing, "It's for emergencies," and Officer Brown said the line that resets a hallway, "Emergencies love forms too." I slid a copy of the agreement through the gap in a sleeve with the same control you use when you feed velvet under a presser foot, slow enough to honor the fabric, firm enough to keep it straight. He read the page aloud the way solid men make words behave. Family Access Agreement. Parties. Nora Hale and Madison Hale. Notary. He stopped, angled the paper like Miss Carver taught me, and his eyebrow did a small official lift. "We'll take this as potential forgery and attempted false notarization. You wish to press a report?" I said, "Yes. Because reports are receipts with vertebrae." My sister Madison said bright and brittle, "This is silly, Mom, tell him we just need a key." And my mother Ruth said quickly, "We just need to get in if she's unwell." And I said, because truth doesn't mind being short, "Call Mrs. Keen for wellness checks, owners do that." And Officer Brown said to my family, "You are hereby advised, do not present instruments for signature that purport to be notarized when they are not." He wrote a case number in a block that keeps bad facts small, tore the page neat, passed it under the chain. "Keep this," he said. "We'll forward to fraud and the notary division." When they realized the day preferred procedure to persuasion, my father Charles said the line he says when cornered, "We'll bring our lawyer." And Mr. Whitaker said from my speaker, smooth as ledger paper, "Please do." And then in the tone that vacuums a room, "Before you do, expect a cease and desist regarding interference and a litis pendant notice if you attempt filings. Also, a trespass warning can be issued if you continue showing up with documents that ask Ms. Hale to surrender access without counsel." The hallway practiced silence. My sister Madison said to her courage, which occasionally needs a phone, "We'll see you in court." And Mr. Whitaker said, "Excellent. Courts have recorders." After they left, Heels clacking their version of certainty down the stairs, Officer Brown said in a quieter voice meant for kitchens, "If they return with more paper, call. Photograph delivery, envelope, time. Do not sign anything on a doorstep." He tucked the copy into his folder the way a person tucks a child into a car seat, click once, check twice. "Fraud will call," he said, and the building seemed to exhale like a choir between verses. Next, the part of the day that makes the rest legal. I carried the blue envelope and the sleeve to Notary Miss Carver's office. Same brick building as Mr. Whitaker's, different floor, same lemon polish, better pens. "Notary Ms. Carver said, "Sit," then said a notary fraud affidavit in front of me and said, "We'll do this as a sworn statement. How delivered, by whom observed, why suspected, what marks inconsistent." I described the knock, the sleeve in the peephole, the too perfect font, the seal with no dent, the commission that belongs to a stranger. She said, "Sign when ready," and I signed the way you secure a hem that will outlive a winter. Mr. Whitaker said from his doorway, he travels like good punctuation. "We'll courier the complaint to the Notary Division and copy Secretary of State. I've also filed a cease and desist to your sister and parents. Copies to management and Officer Brown. If they try another agreement, we escalate to injunctive relief. No contact with the properties without your written approval." He looked at me like a craftsman looks at a straight seam. "You are doing this at the right speed." Before I left, Notary Ms. Carver said one more useful thing, the kind that sounds like a recipe and turns out to be a boundary. For the next 30 days, no signatures in casual spaces. Table, lamp, flat light, witness if possible. Keep your moisture sleeves sealed unless you're logging serials. Think like a registrar, not a relative. I nodded, put the affidavit copy in my tote, and the eucalyptus Mr. Kim had tucked there gave the whole task the smell of a clean promise. On Jones Street, late sun pulled gold out of brick the way irons pull shine from cotton, and Mrs. Keene said at the gate, "Officer left word. We'll make the tenants a note. No one admits contractors without owner's written notice. We'll add the case number. Nothing calms like a number." We stood together and listened to the house be fine for a full 30 seconds, because sometimes you have to let quiet be the loudest evidence. Evening slid in on soft shoes. I set the affidavit and the cease and desist copy under the same pie plate that flattened yesterday's stamps, labeled a new jar doorstep delivery, for 32 p.m. Blue envelope, and wrote the case number on masking tape because tape tells the truth in rooms that forget. The kettle forgot it had already done its job and tried again. I turned it off and let the click be my period. When the second knock came, later, lighter, polite as a brochure, I didn't stand. I looked at the door until it stopped pretending to be a conversation. And the house kept my name without asking for permission. And the house kept my name without asking for permission. Morning slid in the way a bolt slides home, clean, decisive, and the first sound was the soft thud of mail against my door, which in Savannah is how days declare their intentions. I made coffee that tasted like black linen and told myself again that feelings keep you warm for a minute, but paper keeps you housed. And today would be a day for receipts and records, not apologies. On the mat, a rubber-banded stack, one green-striped certified mail envelope with my name squared off like a jaw, 2 white window letters, a postcard from Mrs. Keene reminding tenants about gate hours, and a glossy menu that believed fried shrimp could fix character. I put the menu in the bin and set the certified mail on the table under the lamp, the way you place a specimen you're ready to learn from. The green return receipt winked. An empty signature line waited for a hand that wouldn't be mine. I phoned Mr. Whitaker before I broke the seal. Mr. Whitaker said in the voice of a man who irons his own ties, "Open with care, keep the outer shell," read me the header. And I slid a finger under the glue. The paper gave like a lie that knows it's being watched. Inside, demand for immediate family access and key provision, on letterhead that tried to look like a firm. Paragraph 1 cited family norms. Paragraph 2 cited emergency doctrine. Paragraph 3 threatened injunctive relief. At the bottom a signature that belonged to an attorney named Lang. I said the name out loud. Mr. Whitaker said, measuring his patience, "Local? Out of county?" I said P.O. box and a toll-free number. And he said form letter, reply will be short, no access. All contact through counsel. Attempt further entry, we seek a temporary restraining order. Keep that certified mail jacket. We'll staple the green card to our answer when the post brings it back. Before 9, the phone hummed itself taller. Notary Ms. Carver said, brisk as a clean edge. Your affidavit is logged. Notary Division assigned Investigator Reyes. Bring the original blue envelope piece at 11. We'll scan in their evidence room. Chain of custody form, 2 signatures, no handoffs in hallways. And then softer, almost proud, she said, you're doing fine. I wrote 11 o'clock. Reyes on the corner of my blotter because times on paper are little fences you carry in your pocket. I walked the block before heat learned its own name. The Jones houses sat true, windows like calm eyes. Mrs. Keene said from the gate, holding a clipboard like a shield. FYI, your sister dropped off more notes last night. We did not post, we logged. And she flipped to a page with tidy lines where Madison Hale, deliver. After hours sat beside the case number Officer Brown wrote yesterday. We prefer numbers, she said, and lifted her stamp. It landed with that soft syllable I've come to crave. At 9:15, Ms. Doyle from upstairs opened her door with care and said, if anyone knocks when you're not here, I call Mrs. Keene and then 911, right? And I said, right? And the house seemed to nod. Even Plaster understands policies when you say them out loud. At 10, I put the blue envelope, original, the family access agreement, copy, and the certified mail demand into separate sleeves, labeled in fat block letters, because chaos hates labels. I slipped the case number onto each in pencil, erasable but visible. The tote breathed soap and eucalyptus. The keys in my left and right pockets learned the weight of my hips. The fraud office keeps its air colder than most rooms. Maybe truth likes a chill. Investigator Reyes said in a voice that respects wood grain, state your name, and I said, Nora Hale. And she pointed me to a table that already had a chain of custody form waiting, printed neat, my case number at the top. We sign here and here, she said. You initial the bag after I seal it, we photograph seal numbers, you'll get a receipt and a copy. There is a comfort in rooms where everything has a place to stand. I described the knock, the blue envelope, the notary block with no dent, the careless commission number. Investigator Reyes said which was not indifference but method. She placed the page under oblique light and then under a loop, like a jeweler who understands paper. See here, she said, tapping the seal edge. Low-resolution artifacting at the oval. Cut and paste. Not a real impression. She took 2 photos, logged them, then slipped the original into an evidence bag that made a tidy zip noise I felt in my teeth. You'll leave this with us, she said. You keep your copy. If counsel for the other party calls, tell them it's with fraud. That answers more quickly than anger. On my way out, Investigator Reyes said, one more thing, if you receive certified mail from counsel again, accept it, keep the jacket, photograph the green card when it returns. Judges like green cards. They're proof the law rang the bell. I tucked that sentence next to the keys. At noon, Mr. Whitaker said over the phone, our reply's written. I'll messenger it this afternoon with our own certified mail. We'll attach yesterday's cease and desist, the police case number, and notice of your recorded ownership. If they try an ex parte request for access, our packet will be in the judge's hand first. He paused, then almost like blessing, he said, eat something. Paper runs better on food. I ate a peach over the sink and let the syrup bless my wrists. Not everything useful has to be starch. I walked the lower unit again because quiet work holds back storms you'll never see. I changed 1 smoke detector battery, photographed the meter readings, labeled the image Jones Lower 12:28 p.m. and texted it to Mrs. Keene with 2 words that please managers, on file. The case number turned up on my phone as a text from Officer Brown. Update. Report forwarded to fraud. Call if they return. We patrol tonight. Numbers move differently when the right eyes read them. At 2 the day tried a new door. My mother Ruth said on the curb, hands full of a tin I recognized. Cornbread, your grandmother's. And there was a time when that alone would have reset me, she knows it. Eat while we talk, she said, the old choreography rising like yeast. My father Charles said with that practical affability that wins church committees, we'll back off if you just give a copy of the keys. And my sister Madison said, bright with a lawyer's letter in her pocket, it's what reasonable people do. And I felt the old ache where reason goes to be misnamed. I'll take the pan, I said, because food is not the enemy. And I'll text a photo of the ingredients to Mr. Whitaker so he knows kindness was present. And my mother Ruth said, thrown by the angle, we don't need an attorney for cornbread. And I said gently, we need an attorney for everything you brought cornbread to soften. and my sister Madison said, sugar turning to glass, you love paper more than you love family, and I said, tired enough to tell the truth without embroidery, I love boundaries. Paper is how adults draw them where crying fails. We stood in air that wouldn't decide whether to be kind. Mrs. Keene said from the gate in her manager voice that saves everyone time, if you're delivering food, please use the table and not the threshold. Owners request no door-to-door. And set a little sign that read no unscheduled visits. The letters didn't shout, they persisted. My father Charles said to the sign the way men talk to gadgets, we're not strangers, and Mrs. Keene said crisp but not cruel, policy treats names not feelings. And there it was, my whole new life in 8 words. They left, not with a goodbye, with a plan I wasn't invited to, and that too is a kind of confirmation. At 3, I signed Mr. Whitaker's reply letter on his conference table. 1 page of unromantic clarity. No access now or later, counsel only. Future attempts will prompt her. He stapled my green card stub to the back, affixed a certified mail label of our own, and the receptionist pressed the firm seal into the corner, an emboss that dented the paper's fiber as if to say, this one touched a real desk. Back home I slid the Reyes receipt into my binder, moved yesterday's affidavit behind it, stacked the 2 stamped recorder copies, and laid the cornbread on a cooling rack because heat and paperwork both need air. I wrote today's ledger line, Reyes intake, Whitaker reply, Keene note posted, brown patrol text, green card outbound, and felt the page grow heavier in the way that means it will not blow away when the window forgets itself. Dusk did its slow arithmetic with the brick. The houses on Jones breathed even, tenants' lights coming on like orderly stars. I locked the gate, set a new tamper seal on the lower unit for the night, checked the time aloud for my future self, and let the rosemary touch my coat. My phone buzzed once, Investigator Reyes said. Notary Division opened a file. If opposing counsel calls, refer to file end 417. Sleep easy, numbers are working. I turned the lamp off and the binder clicked shut like a cuff that fits. The street kept its own watch and the case number knew my name. The street kept its own watch and the case number knew my name. Morning came in thin silver, the kind of light that doesn't flatter liars, and the first knock wasn't a family knock. It had weight like a rule. The process server said through the door in a voice that understands stairwells, for Miss Nora Hale, and slid a large craft envelope under the threshold so the corner wouldn't bruise. The paper carried that courthouse smell, ink, toner, patience, and I told myself again that documents outlive moods and today would be about walking them to the places that make them visible. Inside the envelope, a notice of hearing stamped in sharp purple, Judge Ellison, date set for 1 week, subject line, petition for temporary injunction, access and keys. The caption put my sister Madison and my parents Ruth and Charles in a row beside me like a family portrait taken by a machine. The petition itself had the lawyer's rhythm, emergency doctrine, family practice, irreparable harm, and then a tarry paragraph that called me obstructionist, unfilial, unsafe. I read it once without breathing and then again like I was hemming a skirt. Slower at the corners, measure twice. Mr. Whitaker said on the phone, already awake the way paperwork wakes people. Good, now we have a date. We'll answer with the cease and desist, the police case number, the notary division file and 417, your recorded notices, and the Reyes chain of custody. Bring your binder. We'll build exhibits. He paused and I could hear the briefest smile. They wanted an emergency. Now they get a record. I put the notice of hearing in a clear sleeve, logged 8:14 a.m. service, and took the smallest sip of coffee because bitterness can be information, not a mood. On my mat, bright as a traffic cone, lay the green card from yesterday's certified, signed, postmarked, back in my hands like a boomerang with good manners. I stapled it to Mr. Whitaker's reply copy where he likes it. Upper right, square, proud, because judges love rectangles that prove bells were rung. The phone became a small committee. Notary Ms. Carver said, quick and clean. Your affidavit is now part of End 417. The notary division opened a parallel inquiry. The commission number belongs to a lapsed credential 2 counties over. We've requested the stamp impression sheet. If the other side shows a new version, send it. Versions are admissions. Investigator Reyes said, 10 minutes later. We cataloged the blue envelope original. Chain is tight. If opposing counsel contests authenticity, we'll walk it in sealed. Keep the copy flat. Do not staple through the photo area. There is relief in being told how not to ruin the truth. I walked to Jones Street because wood hears better than phones. The block was awake, the rosemary lifting its green, the brick holding last night's cool. Mrs. Keene said from the office doorway, clipboard already full. We received 2 messages via your sister. Flyers trying to schedule a family blessing inside the lower unit. We did not distribute. We logged the attempt and attached your case number. She flipped the page so I could see the tidy ink. Unsolicited event access denied. Owner requires written notice. The ledger stamp came down with that sound I'm getting addicted to, paper touching gravity with purpose. At the lower unit door, the tamper seal I'd set last night sat unbroken. Its hairline intact like a vein you've learned not to press. Ms. Doyle said from the landing, hair braided like a plan. 2 people tried the gate code at 6:30, left when the back light came on. I called Mrs. Keene. I thanked her the way you thank weather that behaved, and wrote 6:30 mm. Attempt, no breach in my pocket notebook because future me likes timestamps better than adrenaline. By 9 Mr. Whitaker had me at his conference table, the binder open like a small city. He said, pointing with the side of a pen that thought it might be a baton, Exhibit A recorder stamps, ownership notice, Exhibit B, Keene ledger, keys audited, posting policy, Exhibit C, Officer Brown's report, work order stopped, Exhibit D and 417 acknowledgement, Exhibit Ray's chain of custody, Exhibit F, screenshots of messages delivered to vendors, Exhibit G, your certified mail green card. He looked up to check my face for fear and found logistics instead. We'll file our response in opposition today with a motion to deny the injunction and a request for attorney's fees under the statute for bad faith emergency petitions. I said, do we need affidavits? And Mr. Whitaker said, pleased. Yes, Mrs. Keene will sign one about the unauthorized lock attempt and flyer drop. Ms. Doyle can submit a simple tenant statement. Attempted code entry, time, no access granted. No argument, just the facts. He slid me a sheet titled Owner Declaration, date, identity, the list of keys, the notices posted, the rule. No contractor without ID and written authorization. Paper makes you your own witness. On the way out, the receptionist pressed the firm's embossed seal into our packet. A deep bruise in the page's fiber that said this touched a real desk, and I felt steadier than my shoes deserved. Outside, my mother Ruth said as if the sidewalk were our kitchen floor, we just wanted a schedule, and my sister Madison said in a tone she reserves for clerks and saints, you're humiliating us in public, and my father Charles said, courts are for criminals, and I said the kind of short that keeps air breathable, courts are for records, and walked. By noon, Officer Brown said on my porch, following up, you've been served, any contacts since? And I handed him a copy of the notice of hearing and a page with the 6:30 incident note. He said, good logging, and wrote the update in his own square hand. We'll be present in the hallway on hearing day, he said. Call if service attempts become visits again. He looked at the tamper sleeve I'd taped for today's mail, and nodded like a teacher whose student finally loves geometry. At 1 the day brought theater. My sister Madison said through the gate, camera already eating the view, we're documenting your refusal, and my mother Ruth said into the lens with the symptoms of martyrdom, we offered food and prayer and policy, and my father Charles said off camera, note the hostility, and I said to the air not to the show, Mrs. Keene manages all access, please contact her office, and said a printed no filming on premises note at eye level with the property code under it. Mrs. Keene said from the path, not raising her voice, cameras off or we call it in. And there are few joys purer than watching a manager outmanage a family with nothing but rules and good shoes. At 2, Notary Ms. Carver said by text, fun fact, opposing counsel called the Notary Division. They were told the commission in their attachment is lapsed. We asked them to preserve their source file. They hung up. Sometimes the best sound is a dial tone. I used the next hour for the ordinary. I bled the radiator that complains first. I measured a window for a shade. I wrote Ms. Doyle a note about package placement. I placed a duplicate gate code memo in the hall. Each small act stitched the day into something weight-bearing. The house, steady as a metronome, kept its part. By late afternoon, Mr. Whitaker said on speaker while I walked the sidewalk because some conversations need sky. Response filed. Motion to deny filed. Court stamped for tomorrow's docket. Judge will likely read tonight. Expect a call from Chambers asking if you'll agree to a brief status conference before the hearing. Say yes. It makes us the calm ones. He added with his dry mercy, where what breathes will do the breathing. I turned the corner at Mr. Kim's florist. He waved a sprig of rosemary like a flag and said, "For luck that smells like dinner," and I tucked it in my tote where it could bless the exhibits without causing a stain. On my phone, a new voicemail. My grandfather? No. That voice had left with the lilies. Judge's assistant said, clear as glass, "This is Chambers for Judge Ellison. Short status is set for tomorrow, 8:45 a.m. Counsel present, parties optional." I replayed it once to make sure the words weren't a kindness I'd invented. Evening took the sharpness out of the bricks. I set the hearing notice, the green card, and our embossed packet under the pie plate, moved yesterday's line down in the ledger, and wrote today's clean service. 8:14 green card returned, and 4:17 active. Reyes chain confirmed. Keen affidavit pending. Doyle statement requested, response filed. Motion to deny filed. Chambers set 8:45. The page grew heavier by exactly the weight of what it could carry. At dusk, my mother Ruth said by text, "Come for supper. We can still fix this," and my sister Madison said, "Camera tomorrow." Wear something sympathetic, and my father Charles said nothing, which is a language he speaks best, and I set the phone down because law benefits from silence more than arguments do. Night rinsed the street clean. I locked the gate, pressed a thumbnail along the tamper seal to feel the ridge that tells the truth, and placed the keys in their dish with the deliberate grace of a gavel that doesn't need to be loud to be final. I turned out the kitchen light and let the room keep its shape without me. When the last knock came late, low, hopeful, I didn't move. I let the door practice saying no without me. When the last knock came late, low, hopeful, I didn't move. I let the door practice saying no without me. Morning still found me early, the kind of pale that smells like copier paper and hallway wax, and I stood at the sink with steam on my face, reminding me why stoves and quartz both like calm heat, telling myself that stamps and keys would do the talking today because voices spend too fast. I packed the binder, recorder stamps up front, keen ledger next, Officer Brown's report, Indy 417, Reyes chain of custody, the green card, the cease and desist, the no filming note, stacked to breathe under the pie plate overnight, now square as bricks. I set the 2 Jones keys in my pockets left and right so my hands would remember which door belonged to which promise. Courthouse air has its own temperature, filtered cool like a librarian's breath, and the elevator hummed a note that said wait, 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 and then offered us to the second floor where portraits keep score. Mr. Whitaker said outside Judge Ellison's courtroom in that even tone that irons people, "There's a short status in Chambers first, 8:45 counsel only. If they try to drag you in, you're optional," and Mrs. Keene said, appearing like she was printed by the building, a tidy folder in hand, my affidavit signed and notarized, timestamps on the lock attempt and flyer drop, tenants notified, policy posted, and she pressed a copy into my palm with the satisfaction of a good stamp landing straight. The door to Chambers swallowed Mr. Whitaker, and time did its courthouse thing, elastic and exact at once. Through the glass, I saw my sister Madison practicing a face. I saw my mother Ruth adjust her scarf the way she used to adjust the thermostat when feelings rose. I saw my father Charles measure the room for leverage and find only benches. The door opened. Mr. Whitaker said softly to my shoulder, "Status complete. Judge wants everyone calm. We argue at 9. Inside the courtroom, the carpet caught steps like secrets. The seal above the bench watched without blinking. Judge Ellison entered. The clerk called the case. The caption put our family in a row like a label on a jar. Madison Hale, Ruth Hale, Charles Hale versus Nora Hale. The judge's voice had that tuned neutrality that makes some people honest by accident. Petitioners seek temporary injunctive relief, Judge Ellison said. Respondent opposes. Counsel appearances? Names laid themselves on the record like tools on a cloth. Opposing counsel Lang said smooth, "Your Honor, this is simple. Family emergency doctrine. Access and a key copy, no more. My clients are concerned for safety, liability, wellness checks. The respondent has obstructed. We ask for a narrow order." My sister Madison said without the court's permission, "We're trying to bless houses," and Judge Ellison said without heat, "Parties will be silent unless addressed," and silence arrived quickly like a well-trained dog. Mr. Whitaker said, steady as ledger paper, "Your Honor, we oppose. There is no emergency. There is a record. One recorder filed ownership notices. 2. Property manager Keene affirms key audit and policy posting. 3. Officer Brown halted an unauthorized rekey attempt. Work order citing sister authorizes. 4. An attempted forged notarization now into 417, with chain of custody documented by investigator Reyes. 5. Certified demand answered with counsel-only contact. Petition is an attempt to circumvent management policy and force access outside contract and safety. We request denial and fees for bad faith emergency filing. Judge Ellison said, "Show me documents." And that is when the room's oxygen steadied because courts like paper best. Mr. Whitaker approached with exhibits A through G like he was setting plates on a narrow table. The judge read, not the way people read to be done, but the way tailors read fabric, touching the corners to feel truth. Judge Ellison said, tapping Exhibit D, end of 417. Notary Division file opened, commission inconsistent affidavit sworn, then to Exhibit C, officer report. No work without owner signature, and to Exhibit B, manager policy. No contractor without written notice, ledger stamp present, and then to the green card, certified mail, reply delivered and signed. Opposing counsel Lang said, hunting for a breath, Your Honor, even with these there is still a family practice. They're willing to accept conditions, limited access windows, notice to manager. And my mother Ruth said because habit is stronger than instruction, we only want to be let in if she's unwell, and Judge Ellison said, not unkind. There is a wellness check path through management and police. The court does not invent a master key for feelings. My father Charles said from the pew, we're not criminals, and Judge Ellison said, courts are not only for criminals, they are for records. Then to Mr. Whitaker, respondent, any further? Mr. Whitaker said, 2 points, Your Honor. Investigator Reyes is present if the court wishes a chain of custody confirmation, and property manager Keene can speak to policy and the 630 attempt. The judge nodded. Investigator Reyes stood. Crisp suit, evidence voice. Original blue envelope instrument is in custody. Seal inconsistency documented. Chain intact. If the court orders, we can present in camera. Mrs. Keene stood next, clipboard calm. Unauthorized rekey order stopped. Flyer drop logged. Tenants advised, gate code changed, tamper seals placed, and her stamp of a voice landed like ink. Opposing counsel Lang said, softer now. Your Honor, we request a status quo. No changes, no retaliation. And Mr. Whitaker said, we already live in status quo. Owner notice recorded. Manager policy posted. No contact with properties without written authorization. And Judge Ellison said, I'm prepared to rule. You could feel the benches sit up. Judge Ellison said, the petition for temporary injunction, access and keys is denied. There is no showing of irreparable harm or emergency. The record indicates lawful ownership notices, management policy, police intervention against unauthorized entry, and a pending notary fraud inquiry. Petitioners are enjoined from attempting entry, contracting vendors, or presenting instruments for signature, without respondents' written authorization and management coordination. Any wellness concerns will go through Mrs. Keene or police. As to costs and fees, the court takes respondents' request under advisement pending resolution of the notary matter. The sound the room made was not applause. It was something more useful, air leaving the wrong lungs. My sister Madison said into the space between the ruling and the clerk's pencil, we will appeal, and Judge Ellison said, you may. You will follow this order while you do. And the gavel touched wood in that ceremonial way that reminds you why wood was trees first. Outside, the hallway smelled like settled rain and old carpet. Officer Brown said near the door, heard it, will note the order, call if they test it, and wrote the case number next to a new box labeled order issued, denial. Mr. Whitaker said to my binder as much as to me, we'll file a notice of order with recorder and deliver copies to Mrs. Keene, tenants and fraud. I'll also send a polite reminder to opposing counsel that further doorstep documents go to my office, not your mat. Investigator Reyes said, passing with a nod that felt like a yes, we keep into 417 live. If a new notarized paper appears, it joins the file as a friend the court will meet. My mother Ruth said with a voice that carried casseroles even when empty, you didn't need to make it a spectacle, and my father Charles said more to the wall than to me, keys belong to families, and I said because repetition is how habits learn new words, keys belong to names, and my sister Madison said to her camera instead of to me, Viewers, ask yourselves if this looks like justice, and Mrs. Keene said from behind, managerial and merciful. No filming on premises. And that was that. We walked the block like people who'd been told the weather, not like people trying to change it. Mr. Kim said from his doorway, lifting the little scissors he uses to make roses less proud. Heard good news? And tucked a sprig of mint behind the rosemary in my tote because some blessings don't require paperwork but never fight it either. Back at Jones, we posted the notice of order in the hall, clear sleeve, eye level, date in pen that bites. Access/keys injunction denied. Petitioners barred from entry. Contact management. Mrs. Keene said, stamping the ledger. Tenants will sign receipt of notice. That's my favorite kind of signature. And I initialed the bottom corner the way a seamstress knots thread where nobody sees it but the fabric knows. Afternoon went long in gold. We took a short meeting in Mr. Whitaker's office to decide the afters. He would send a letter to opposing counsel offering a reasonable access protocol for wellness checks through management. Paper is generous when it's safe. I would log any knocks with time, envelope, and temperature of the day, because memory likes company. Mr. Whitaker said, if they post online, ignore. Courts don't eat hashtags, they eat exhibits. And I felt my ribs agree. Evening moved in like a careful tenant. No scraped chairs, no doors slammed. I placed Judge Ellison's order under the pie plate with the others and wrote the line that made the day weigh what it should. Order denying TI entered. Notice posted, recorder can fraud notified. Counsel to serve copies, wellness path defined. I checked the tamper seal on the lower unit, pressed it with a thumb until it answered back. I turned the gate key and listened for the tiny sentence, a good lock speaks when it decides with you. At home, the kettle's whistle sounded like a coat coming off. The binder clicked shut with that cuff-like certainty. My mother Ruth texted, you could have said yes. My sister Madison texted, we're not done. My father Charles didn't text at all, which is his eloquence. I set the phone screen down and let the room keep its shape. Night made the bricks honest. I put the left key in the dish, then the right, and neither argued. The order did what orders do. And the house slept under my name. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe. New stories every day.